You have 23 new messages.
My God is in my soul. He fills my heart with gladness. He takes away the sadness. My God is in my soul. Of malice I have not a whit, would never say.
You atheist piece of shit.
God makes my life so full and rich, share it with me.
You sick son of a bitch.
My God says to be good. Compassion is a blessing, and so I am confessing. My God says to be good. He's taught me lessons I learned well and
He can fucking go to hell.
but I'll learn better if I can. I'm not
The idiot, most stupidest man. Fucking unpatriotic fuckface.
You're disgusting and vile.
You're one giant asshole.
I'll always love my God. I'll always love my God. I'll always love my God.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God,
With the information you need to defend your home, your family, and your nation, this is Concerned Women Today.
For the first time ever, a federal appeals court declared the Pledge of Allegiance unconstitutional. Well, is it or isn't it? A Sacramento, California atheist who objected to the Pledge of Allegiance got his victory in court yesterday. Michael Newdow, who brought the case to court, objected to the Pledge of Allegiance because his second-grade daughter was required to recite it at her elementary school. He said, "I'm an American citizen. I don't like my rights infringed upon by my government."
We were just sitting, and that was after I had started the complaint, and the case was proceeding. And I just recited the Pledge of Allegiance while she was there. And I didn't know she had ever even said it. And apparently she was saying it in preschool. And I had just barely finished, one nation indivisible with liberty and justice for all. And I gave it without the under God. And with liberty and justice for all. And as soon as she got to all, she goes, under God. And I thought that was amazing, that this kid has already been indoctrinated. She noticed that under God was missing. She was 4 years old at the time. I said, that's incredible.
There are probably a lot of people out there, our viewers in particular, who think that what you're doing is blatantly anti-American.
Those people don't understand the Constitution. The Constitution says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, which means that, and as the Supreme Court says, and as you stated earlier, that nobody should be made to feel like an outsider. And I would only ask every one of those people to ask themselves if they had to say every morning or when they wanted to pledge allegiance to their flag that we were one nation under the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, or one nation under David Koresh, or one nation under Jesus, one nation under Mohammed, how they'd feel.
Tell me, Mr. Newdow, is it your intention to go after In God We Trust and God Bless America?
I'd love that.
When I first saw the Bill of Rights, I sure had some sleepless nights.
I first saw Mike Newdow the night he was on TV talking to Connie Chung. He had just won his first victory in the Ninth Circuit to have the words under God taken out of the pledge, and the country was outraged. I wondered who this guy was and why he was being treated like public enemy number one. I didn't have much of a religious upbringing myself, unless you count a habit of calling dial-a-prayer. But like dial-a-prayer, I thought religion was a private matter and government was supposed to keep out of it. A few months later, I met Mike Newdow when he gave a speech near where I live. They say most stories have one of two themes. A stranger comes to town or you go on a journey. This story is both. I wanted to know what makes someone wake up one morning and decide to sue the Congress and the President before breakfast. I also wanted to know why it bothered people so much.
For there's nothing to resist. Votes cast for an atheist.
I know a lot of you heard that I was getting threats, which I did get initially. In the first couple days, there were some nasty calls and some threatening calls. But since that time, it's really been overwhelming, the number of people who have been appreciative and supportive, and emails, letters, and phone calls. They were really great. And I have one that I want to read that's especially poignant. It comes from Washington, D.C., and I don't know if the writer, the author is here today. If he is, I hope he's not embarrassed by this, but I just wanted to read this. It says, "Dear Mike, last night Laura and I could barely contain ourselves. Finally, someone did what we've wanted to have done for the longest time. We're so sick of this God stuff in government. In fact, I was planning to eliminate it from my speeches way back. But then the cocaine stories got out, and well, you know. I mean, I figured if this born-again stuff worked for Charles Colson, it should work for me, right? Hey, can you do something about those darn congressional chaplains? Yours truly, George."
Who are you? Patrick Smith. Just pull that down and walk slowly. Right. No, I'm trying to figure where it's...
The pledge was started in 1892, and they came up with a pledge that was purely secular. It did not have "under God" in it. And for 62 years, it was doing fine. And in 1954, the Congress of the United States, in the middle of McCarthyism, decided to take the two words "under God" and stick them in the middle of the Pledge of Allegiance. Clearly, you can't do that. But you read the case law, and it's so classically unconstitutional. It wasn't even close. But nobody complained at the time, and it got in there.
So, what are you doing this for?
Nobody else did it.
That's it?
That's it. That's why me. Okay. It all began one Sunday in 1954. That old Pledge of Allegiance, it needed something more. Though it seemed to be working for 60-something years. The nation had McCarthy, the nation had great fears. The politicians sensed it. Hey, how could they refuse? They had those Pledge of Allegiance, need some old religion blues.
The day after this was filmed, a full panel of the Ninth Circuit Court voted to uphold the June decision, making the pledge illegal in 9 states. The next step was for the other side, the school district, with the backing of the Justice Department, to appeal to the Supreme Court. I spoke to Mike by telephone when he heard the news.
Were you surprised?
No, I always thought I was going to win. Didn't I say that there? Everybody says you're not going to win. The law is so clearly on my side. There's no reason I shouldn't win this case. It's cool to think that I may be going to the Supreme Court. None of this is cool. No, but I have no idea. I don't know this stuff at all. I'm winging it all the way.
As in any good American story, I headed west to California, where the pledge lawsuit began. Mike Newdow lived in Sacramento, and his daughter attended school in nearby Elk Grove. It became public news that Mike Newdow and the child's mother, Sandra Banning, were involved in a custody battle, which complicated the Pledge of Allegiance case. Banning had gone on national television saying she was a Christian and that her daughter had no problem saying the pledge as is. As a non-custodial parent, there's an issue of standing, his right to bring the case in the first place. I began to understand why Mike Newdow had the Pledge of Allegiance blues.
They had those Pledge of Allegiance, need some old religion blues.
How did you first hear about the pledge case?
Well, we got served with a summons in federal district court that we'd been sued, along with the Congress and Bill Clinton and others. The gentleman, Mr. Newdow, had been to his daughter's principal and objected to her being in a class where the Pledge of Allegiance was said. So, as we always do in those instances, we offered him the remedy that's available in state law, which is the child does not have to say the pledge.
Did you fix your hair, homie? No. Oh, no. Good morning.
They can opt out, and they can do that either by sitting in the classroom and not saying it, or if they find that objectionable, we can take the child someplace else. The children are a captive audience, so you don't want to push religion or a particular religion on them. But I think the Pledge of Allegiance has become, a cultural national icon.
Good morning, Wolverines. Mr. Robards with your Daily Bulletin for Wednesday, October 1st, 2003. It is Wednesday, so let's please begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will be very brief. Today is the modality 8.
It says, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Okay, what the lawsuit says is that what Michael Newdow is saying, when the 1954 Act of Under God is establishing a certain religion, okay, just like Nick was saying, okay, certain religion. And the question is, did Congress pass a law that establishes a certain religion by when we say the Pledge of Allegiance? Are you understanding what I'm saying? Now, do you think the under God establishes a certain religion in this country?
I see putting under God in there is actually a good thing, because it shows that in America you can be free and choose whatever religion you want to choose, compared to the communists, which were evil and bent on taking over the world.
Since people are may take under God out of the pledge, then they might want to take it out of our money.
Would it bother you if In God We Trust was taken off our money?
Wouldn't bother me. I can still buy things with it.
Last year, we all learned about Buddhism and Islamic religions, and my parents aren't filing lawsuits against everybody.
You think it's wrong to bring a lawsuit?
Well, yeah.
This man, she should drop it, because the girl has the choice.
He didn't even have custody of the child, and her mom and the daughter, they're both Christian, and they go to church every single week.
If your mother told you to say the pledge and your father said don't say the pledge, what would you do?
I don't know. I'd kind of be stuck.
When all the justices walk in, does anybody know what the opening statement that they say there? Does anybody know what the opening statement? Because it's going to be said when they hear this court case, if they choose to. They'll say, God save the honorable court. Those words, God, capital G, O-D, save the honorable court, is in those words they say every morning when they open up a session of Supreme Court. Are you guys aware of that?
What's the best-selling flag you got?
Best-selling one?
Yeah.
Different countries. United Kingdom, Italy,
Is that the American flag? Can you tell me where are these flags made? They made here?
We just put a USA stamps on everything.
You put USA
We just rip off the China sticker, and we just put the little USA thing right on it.
Where are they really made? Are some of them made in Taiwan, Korea? Where's the box? It'd be on here? Here's a little flag.
Made in USA.
Really?
Right there, yeah.
Where's it really made?
Well, I don't think he didn't sew that on there.
How about this flagpole? Can you see where this one's made? I can't see without my glasses.
All right, I'll read it for you. USA. USA right there. Patent number. That's the patent number.
It says made in Taiwan. Made in Taiwan.
You're right, absolutely.
Put American Eagle on it?
Yeah. It's okay, they'll get a lot of money and then we'll start working here. Go down the street and look for a flag. You won't see them anywhere.
You won't?
It's only for the businesses, so you can look and find it.
But all the schools need flags, don't they?
Yeah, they all have one.
They say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, yeah. Nobody knows the words, but they still say it.
Nobody knows the words. Do you know the words?
Mm-hmm. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for one republic for which it stands, individual, for justice for all. Liberty, justice for all.
That's pretty close.
Pretty damn
Very
close.
good. There's a guy who's changing the Pledge of Allegiance.
I don't know who he is. Somebody out here in Sacramento.
That's right.
I don't know the guy.
Okay.
Before I left Sacramento, I decided to pay a visit to Mike Newdow's house and see what he was up to. I wanted him to explain the standing issue, since that's what everyone seemed to be talking about.
This is our swing that somebody just cut.
Why would they do that?
I don't think it's because I think just some hoodlums came by. Line bag.
You don't think it was an act of political vandalism?
No, I don't think so.
Are you trying to make those two pieces of rope
Yeah.
magically go back together?
If there's a God. Bummer.
Oh. Wanna try again?
No.
No.
Give him another chance? Okay. Want to try again? I'll even give you longer. Wouldn't it be cool if on film? It was interesting because they had a school board meeting where they were giving awards, and they gave like 15 awards, and every single person was a different race. I mean, it was really interesting. You know, the women, you know, or Asian women or students and you know, African Americans and Latinos, and everybody came up there. And then they had one of their board members speaking on diversity and how wonderful it is to have diversity and everything. So I got up and I said, what is this? I mean, you keep talking about diversity, you have all these diverse people winning awards, it's great, this is what America's about. And then you come up here and you say, we have to say that we're a nation under God, completely disregarding all the atheists in this society, or at least in your schools. Don't you have an obligation? You're supposed to be protecting them. I said, what are you doing here?
You're using your daughter for your own political agenda.
I think George Bush, if I'm not mistaken, when he ran for president, didn't he take pictures of his daughter and put them out there that show that he's a family man? And I remember the outrage and the people complaining and just screaming that he's using his daughter. I remember that one. And the state of California took us, separated us, based on nothing, based on this nonsense, because I let her pee in a bathroom in an airport. I mean, it's ridiculous.
What?
We stopped, I think it was Kansas City. And she says, Dad, I need to go to the bathroom. I said, you want to go to the men's room with me, or we're going to go to the women's room? She's 5 years old. Immediately, she says, the women's room. She comes out, and people tell Mom she'll be so proud of you. And that was it. I was accused of child neglect by one of the expert psychologists because I did that.
So that's why you lost custody?
That was, well, the reason I lost custody is because in response to being accused of child neglect, I told this expert psychologist that she's an imbecile. And that's why I lost custody.
Oh,
and
why did you do that?
Because she is an imbecile.
The mother's Sandra Banny, whose name is public, she says she's a Christian, she's raising her daughter as a Christian.
Yeah, and I'm an atheist. I'm raising my daughter as whatever she wants to be, but exposed to atheist ideas.
I don't believe it's
this
in
is
here.
fake. This is a real hand.
Show the hand.
Well, put your hand on it. Let's see if it matches. Does it match?
Right on top of it.
Yeah! Look at that.
Ooh.
That's perfect.
And whose is that?
That's my daughter's. The school is not doing anything wrong. The school doesn't have a religious purpose. The school says, let's be patriotic. We'll take the Pledge of Allegiance. How much more patriotic can you be? So, and the judges look at that and they say, well, how can we hold these school districts guilty? They're not doing anything. They're just saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I said, Congress is the entity that did the bad thing here. They're the people who violated the law, and so I'm suing them. You want to change the country? You want to make it better? This is it, right here. This and a printer. You got
This is what you,
Computer
what you
and
use.
a
This is
printer.
how you sue Congress? I want to
sue Congress right here.
What would I need?
This is it. Here's how you sue in federal court. You go, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Boom. And there you got them. And it tells you how to do it.
There are a lot of rules?
Well, actually not bad. State, it's impossible, but this is not bad. There. Although I said that, I have a child in school who has the right to go to school without having religious dogma inculcated, my main concern is me. I have a right to have a Pledge of Allegiance that doesn't have dogma that I disagree with, religion that I find offensive. Rule 8, a pleading which sets forth a claim for relief, whether an original claim can be it tells you how to do it. It's not much.
So you can sue.
That's the whole thing.
So what if you want to sue the president?
You can try. To me, it's so clear and it's so correct. We don't want government getting involved with religion. It's a very dangerous thing to do. People get hurt. I mean, look at the Taliban, look at all the wars. It's really a bad idea. The framers were very wise to make sure we don't do that. And people, I think, have misinterpreted the case. They think it's not patriotic. I'm against the pledge. I'm not actually totally wild about the pledge, but I'm not against the pledge. If people, if government chooses to have a pledge, that's fine. I'm against sticking religious dogma in the middle of a pledge, which is something totally different.
So you're a doctor?
ER.
So why did you become a lawyer?
I actually did it to change medicine. I was very upset with the way medicine was practiced.
You write songs about your cases. You always written songs?
Songs about all things. I have a big hit, Calipigeon. Oh, Calipigeon, oh, what a word. Calipigeon is a word, it's a true word. It comes from the Greek, cala, meaning pretty, like calligraphy, pretty writing. And pygis means buttocks. Having well-formed buttocks, calipigeons. Calipigeon, oh, what a word. It's bark for dogs, by cats is purred. Use it on your girlfriend, you'll feel so glib. And on your boyfriend too, for women to live, oh, calipigeon, calipigeon,
what a word, oh, what a word, use it, you'll never. We flip the bird, cause it's refreshing, and cause it's clean, and also cause no one knows what you mean, nobody knows what you mean. Yeah!
With its constellation of stars on a blue field and its 13 red and white stripes is not just a confection of colors. It is not just pieces of fabric. It plumbs the depths of who we are, who we were, and who we still hope to be. There is no comma between the words one nation and under God. It's one nation under God. All four words go together.
There's a lawsuit that would remove the words under God from the Pledge of Allegiance. What do you think about that?
I think it's a dreadful idea. I think they belong there. This country was formed as a Christian country, basically, originally, and we do worship God, and we should give our allegiance to Him.
Did you say this is a Christian country?
When it was founded, it was for Christianity.
Most Americans have no idea what the Bill of Rights has to say. Most Americans have no idea what the Ten Commandments say. They know 2 or 3 of the Ten Commandments. Most Americans think that the Constitution of the United States has God in it. It's been referred to, of course, as the godless Constitution. And
I spoke to Alan Dershowitz, who had just written a book about the Founding Fathers and the Constitution.
A dozen right-wing religious leaders railed against the Constitution in the 18th century because it didn't have God and it didn't have Jesus in it. It was a very deliberate decision to leave God out of the Constitution. The framers of our Constitution despised organized religion, despised Christianity. Many of them despised the Bible. Jefferson hated the Bible. He, in fact, wrote his own. He thought the gospel writers were ignoramuses. He called most of the New Testament dung, which is a polite word for shit. When Jefferson, just before his death, wrote a letter commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, he said, the real purpose of the Declaration was to free men and women of the chains of bondage that had been inflicted on reason of human beings by European clericalism, by the Jerry Falwells of Europe, by the Pat Robertsons of Europe.
Do you know what our biggest problems are and what you want done about them? Let's look them over. We declared our independence way back in 1776. We said officially that we take our rights from God.
Nature's God had a particular meaning in 1776. It did not mean Jehovah. It did not mean the father of Jesus. It did not mean Allah. It meant a very, very different moving clockmaker, a deistic, distant God who set the universe in motion and then pulled away. When you merge church and state, inevitably you create a tyranny, and you create a tyranny of belief. And religion is different from other subjects. People don't want to really debate religion. They all know they're right.
Now therefore, I, James Riccitelli, Mayor of the City of Milford, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim Thursday, May 1st, 2003, as a day of prayer here in Milford.
Lord, we pray. Folks, would you stand, please? We pray, Lord, over this mayor, Father, that not only will he
he served well and to your honor, but that he will leave legacy behind. Lord, that he will leave a path that will be followed, a standard that will be looked up to. We believe this, Lord. We believe this not only can, but it shall happen. Lord, we believe you've placed a man of integrity and of character to lead us in this city. He has honored you, Lord. He's supported your name in this place. Father, he has tried to do what is right, what is honorable, even in tough decisions.
The pledge was written by Francis Bellamy, a socialist minister in Boston who had been fired from his church for his socialist activities. Not only was there no reference to God, but it was intended to promote the public schools over parochial schools, which people were worried about at that time.
Francis Bellamy is in charge of this program for Columbus Day, for the public schools. Okay, he wrote the whole thing. And he said, what shall I do? He said, I shall build it around a flag ceremony outside the school. In the United States, it's somewhat unique, a verbal flag salute. And the verbal flag salute is the Pledge of Allegiance.
What was that first pledge like?
The principal would say, stand at attention, and it was a military type salute. I pledge allegiance to my flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And so you had all the kids doing that.
How did they put their arms out, like that?
Put down. So palms up. Now, if you put your palm down, you got the Nazi salute. But palms up was the pledge.
I'm John Wayne. Is there any better or equal hope in the world, Lincoln asked, than the ultimate justice of the people? We Americans believe there is not. There is a phrase which recurs in our national documents and defines perhaps better than any other the nub of the conflict between the opposing systems of values which sweep the world today. That phrase is, this nation under God. That phrase and others like it set the standard of our concept of man.
Now in the 1950s, the Soviet Union is pushing, we're for equality, liberty, and justice for all. They could say, we pledge allegiance to a republic, because they had dozens of republics in the Soviet Union. It's the Democratic Republic of China, it's the North Korean Republic, so these guys are using the same words as in the pledge, but the one word they couldn't use was under God. In 1951, the board of the Knights of Columbus said this is a good idea to add under God to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Who are the Knights of Columbus?
Well, the Knights of Columbus are sort of the Masons of the Roman Catholic Church. The American Legion joined them, and then the Hearst newspapers joined them.
The Knights of Columbus ignored several requests for an interview. I had only one question. Why had the Knights of Columbus, an organization tied to the Vatican, another country, gotten involved with changing the American Constitution?
A flood tide of filth is engulfing our country in the form of newsstand obscenity. This moral decay weakens our resistance to the onslaught of the communist masters of deceit. They lack the moral standards and values of our Judeo-Christian heritage. They not only oppose the principles of that heritage, but they advocate their overthrow. Such as these shots, which are typical of the preoccupation with the female breast, to a point that it has become a fetish, and with lesbian implications. Oh God, deliver us, Americans, from evil.
Many Americans believe that God and the United States are pretty much one and the same, and that we are God's favorite. Now, my mother's Canadian. I've been told that Canada is also one of God's favorites, but most Americans
think the United States is God's favorite, and the Pledge of Allegiance is saying that. Under God, you can't top that.
Well, the atheists are coming. That was the common shout. They may think that they're clever, but we know what they're about. Well, we all know quite precisely just exactly what they're doing. Not about to let them bring this country into ruin. It's bad enough with Catholics, Mormons, and the Jews. They have those Pledge of Allegiance, need some old religion blues.
The American public will not tolerate taking God out of the Pledge of Allegiance. That is a terrible thing to say, but that's what all the polls show, and that's what I think tends to be public opinion in America. We are a country which in theory believes in separation of church and state, but in practice we're the most religious, most church-attending, most God-fearing country in the Western world today.
But the Supreme Court is supposed to uphold the Constitution. Isn't the Constitution on the side of taking under God out?
And the Easter Bunny is supposed to bring eggs, and Santa Claus is supposed to bring presents, and God's supposed to reward the righteous and punish the unrighteous. If you trust the integrity of the United States Supreme Court in a case as divisive as the Pledge of Allegiance, then I have an election I can sell you. It's called the 2000 election. Just read Bush versus Gore.
We can trust in that greater power who guides the unfolding of the years. And in all that is to come, we can know that his purposes are just and true. May God continue to bless America.
You know, I have a poll here in front of me. 92% of Americans believe in God. Is it your fear that there's going to be some theocracy? Is that what the fear is?
Not the future. There is a theocracy right now.
In America, we're living in a theocracy?
You don't think so?
I think that's silly.
That's silly, huh? Well, you might want to check the constitutions of 8 states, such as South Carolina, that say that no person who denies the existence of a supreme being shall hold any office under this Constitution.
We're going to take a break right there. More with Michael Newdow. You're watching the network.
I don't think a country needs a pledge. Pledge should remain a cleaning fluid. People shouldn't take pledges. People should act. You act. If you act well and you act in a way that is supportive of your values, that's enough. A pledge is an invitation to hypocrisy.
Have you ever heard the name Michael Newdow?
Not that I could say.
That's the name of the man who has the lawsuit to take under God out of the Pledge of Allegiance. What would you say to him?
He should be shot.
They should probably put him in jail for something like that.
Does he need money to go to Kazakhstan or Australia or someplace like that? I'll chip in on that.
His kid doesn't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I think it's terrible when one person can ruin a whole country.
This is America. This is, the Pledge of Allegiance is America. It's built around God and everybody.
You know, the wonderful duality of the pledge and under God is that we're trying to mix patriotism and religion. And I don't think there's a real winning combination.
Well, it kind of gives something to look forward to when you're going for war or something like that, you know?
I don't feel that the words under God should be a part of the pledge. I don't feel they should be a part of the government. It's a private issue. Everyone has different names for God, never mind the fact that they have different beliefs about what God is, and some don't believe in God even.
What we don't realize, but the world's realized, is that the fundamentalists have kind of ruled the day, and that there's a very conservative agenda being pushed through a religiosity in this society.
Now from the nation's capital, here is your host, President of Concerned Women for America, Sandy Rios.
Thank God little babies will no longer be brutalized, brains crushed by partial birth abortion. Thank God that at least for today, Terry Schiavo can be fed and nourished, held and loved by her family. Life prevails for now. Also on the list of people voting against this ban were Joe Lieberman, of all people. Joe Lieberman, who's supposed to be a person who treasures life. He's Jewish. He should know better. Nevertheless, the forces opposing God and his people are powerful. So powerful, David Limbaugh declares it persecution. Stay tuned.
Hi,
Hi, this is Sean Hannity, and 25 years ago, Beverly LaHaye founded Concerned Women for America in order to counter the radical feminist agenda.
I consider myself part of the religious right. I don't flinch at that. I don't care what name you call it. I'm very much a follower of Christ. And what's happening is the atheists, led by Michael Newdow and others, are intent on forcing their godlessness on the rest of us, and they have no right to do that. It's interesting, Phil. I'm just sitting here thinking, it was, what, a year ago, a little more than a year ago, September 11th happened, and I will never forget seeing the images of the towers and the people falling. I will never forget being on my knees, rocking in prayer. Do we really think that we can cry out to the God that we have just spent, 20 years removing from culture? I don't think any of us want to do that. I feel sad for Michael Newdow. I had a chance to talk to him privately. He's a very wounded man, and he's on a crusade because of his wounds, but he is misguided.
Michael Newdow says that he has the law on his side. Who do you think is going to win?
He's got the judges on his side, no question about it. And if we cannot stop these, judicial activism in the courts, Michael Newdow, it'll be a free pass to the end zone for him. Except that he doesn't, the legislatures are not in his pocket, neither's the Congress. He's got a little work to do before he gets to that point, and we're here to stop him.
Nice shot, Michael.
At the end of June, Mike Newdow is celebrating his 50th birthday with family and friends at a ranch resort near New Paltz, New York. If he was sad and wounded, he wasn't showing it. He looked like a guy who knew exactly where he was going.
I would describe Michael as a caring, loving son. He always did things well, and he always accomplished whatever he set out to do. And he was the music man in high school. He was the music man in law school.
In high school, I would say that he was probably one of the most unusual, smartest guy in the class.
When you were in school, didn't you start a religion?
I did.
What, can
in
you tell me
7th
about
grade,
it?
I started Hermanism, and we had a supreme being, Harvey. And I still, every once in a while, talk to Harv, but recognizing he's probably not there. So,
What do you say to Harvey?
like if you lose something, Harv, come on, cut me a break, help me find this thing. It's my card.
Can you read it?
Yes, it says, Reverend Dr. Michael A. Newdow, Facts, the First Amendment's Church of True Science, and it has my address and phone and stuff. The Universal Life Church started advertising that you can become a minister in the state of California. You can do all the things that ministers do, bury people, marry people, whatever ministers do. Just send in, you'll get a card, and you'll be an official minister. So I thought that was cool, and sent in and got a card. And I got it in 1977 and totally forgot about it. And then as I was working on this case, it occurred to me. I said, hey, I'm a doctor. I'm a Reverend Dr. Michael A. Sounds good.
He did tell us that if he wins in this case, it's going to be very big, but I think even he was overwhelmed by the notoriety. The media was really a tremendous shock.
You may remember Madalyn Murray O'Hare. She was the atheist who successfully got prayers out of public schools, and she was called the most hated woman in America. Are you prepared for that kind of identity, that tag, the most hated man in America?
I wasn't prepared for the media. I guess I was stupid. I always said when people asked me, I said, this is going to be huge, but I just envisioned the public. I envisioned lots of letters to the editor and stuff. I just didn't think about the TV and the other stuff.
I mean, some people think that you're just doing this to get attention.
Whatever I am, people say, oh, he's doing this for money, he's doing it to be famous, he's doing this for whatever reason. It's irrelevant, okay? That's one of my songs. I'm rotten. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. Whatever I am, the pledge is still against the law, okay? I mean, that's the issue here. So that's how the song goes. The worst you ever saw, but the pledge is still against the law. So.
What'd you have to do?
If the pledge was illegal, so were the millions of taxpayer dollars going to so-called faith-based institutions, the tax-exempt status of churches, and the salaries of congressional chaplains. Clearly the Lone Ranger had a tough ride ahead. While Mike Newdow was riding high in the saddle, waiting to hear if the Supreme Court would hear the pledge case, a story in another courthouse took over the headlines. Roy Moore, Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, had installed a 2-ton stone monument of the Ten Commandments in the court's rotunda. When he was ordered to remove it, people came from all over the country to support him. I went to Montgomery to see what was going on.
Let's sound an alarm from the East Coast to the West Coast to come to Montgomery, Alabama. Go for it, brother.
A gentleman came up alongside me, a resident here of Montgomery, who had marched in the civil rights marches. He is a veteran of Vietnam, and he looked at me and he said, "Can you believe that in this great city we're fighting the Ten Commandments? Yeah. I just can't believe it." And he shook his head. There has to be a moral anchor that is immutable and unchangeable. And if it has its origins in human theory, then humans can change that theory.
But who is to decide where it comes from? Because most of the people I've talked to today say it comes from Jesus Christ, but not everyone in America believes that Jesus Christ is the supreme being. A lot of people believe in a lot of other things, don't they?
Yes, and that's why we advocate for the Ten Commandments. Jews, Christians, Muslims, all equally revere the Ten Commandments.
Not everyone believes in God, do they?
Well, but for those who don't believe in God, they have a much bigger problem than the Ten Commandments. Much bigger.
Hallelujah, Jesus. Come on, can you just give God praise? Hallelujah. Speak to our hearts, Father. Sing this with us. Say hallelujah. Hallelujah. For our Lord God Almighty.
Lauren Brown. She's a friend of ours from Wichita that came with her mom. This is my son, Nicholas Spartan, and my oldest daughter, Brittany.
Why did you want to bring them?
Well, because I believe that this is a turning point for our nation. I believe that if we do not win this battle, that really it's going to mark us as a pagan nation, and there will be no turning back.
I told my husband, I said, well, all the judge has to do is just put a call out, and I'm deploying down into Montgomery. I'm going to Montgomery to stand with the people that believe that the Ten Commandment is the fundamental basis of our laws. I've been in a courtroom several times, and you do put your hand on the Bible.
Yeah, Lord. Yeah, Lord. In the name of Jesus.
In the absence of God, then I might want your camera and your mic now. Who's to say it's wrong for me to take it?
If God tells you to, I guess.
No, I'm saying when you got the absence of the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal. Okay.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, then what's to say that I can't? Is my word against yours?
Somebody tell him thank you, Lord. We ought to tell him thank you tonight.
I didn't have everything out of my life that needed to been out. I was still hypocriting and doing what I was doing. I had a little sin left in there. This fine man that I was. Yeah, he was fine. But I realized that I wasn't. I needed to clean up.
But I know somebody here.
God is just not going to do a whole bunch for you, and you got excess baggage. I have to tell people that. I told the Lord, if you would heal me, I'll serve you, and that's been over 12 years ago.
What happened to the guy?
I had to let the fine young man go.
What do you think the country thinks of Alabama right now?
I would say that they think that we're not very intelligent people, good rednecks, you know. The same old thing. I mean, a man told me last night that 72% of Alabamians think that the monument should stay in the State Judicial Building. I said, you know what? At one time, 72% of Alabamians thought that slavery should stay too.
Tonight we are inspired as church leaders by another churchman whose office is upstairs. A man who follows God at great personal cost. He is anything but a coward.
I believe, as you do, that God is everywhere, but doesn't mean there's an obligation in order to show that by putting up a monument that is deemed by a court not to be appropriate in a particular place. And by the way, they did say you could put it in your office, right?
Well, it did, but you know, the federal court isn't an interior decorator of the Alabama Judicial Building.
Roy Moore has made a mockery of the Alabama judicial system. We're now the laughing stock of the nation because he has said the federal government has no jurisdiction over him as Lord High Priest. I'm sorry, I mean Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The analogy...
Is that a slip?
it was an intentional slip.
So I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you all kind of stuff right here. Okay, do you see this right here?
Yep.
Okay, this is the pyramid right here. Okay, it's Egyptian pyramid. Okay, that right there is not the eye that everybody thinks of George Washington. It's all seeing eye. See the rays of Irish, the Egyptian guy. Okay, why do we have foreign writing on our money that says one world order on our money?
Why do you think?
They're not. Because that's what they're going to bring into, and this gap right here is significantly a gap right here, and they're going to close it once they do it, which isn't too far away. You'll see it in your lifetime. And
who's going to close that gap?
The one world government. When it becomes one world government, this country is no longer in charge of things.
So you think that pyramid should be off the currency?
This is Egyptian. What's it got to do with American? We're not Egyptians. We don't speak Egyptian.
Oh, you have America. You have Christian America. You have evangelical Christian America, and you have fundamentalist Christian America. Very small.
Where do you fit in that?
I'm not sure where I fit. I'm not sure. I know fundamentalists who think I'm a liberal. I know liberals who think I'm a fundamentalist, and I have a religious identity crisis. I'm a Jew who believes in Jesus.
Does that make you kind of the odd man out here?
Yeah, in Alabama, you don't find too many kosher delicatessens.
Every other religion that is followed faithfully has the same moral basis as the Ten Commandments.
Do you think that's true?
It doesn't. No, Well, how are the Muslims? Then why are the Muslims beating their wives and killing and blowing up school buses?
Christians that beat their wives.
They're following.
There are a lot of Christians that beat their wives. I hate to say that, but.
Did you paint your truck yourself?
Yes.
You just do this for this event?
The two sides were for the event, okay? Because the issue of the day. This I've had for a long time.
The Ten Commandments here?
The Ten Commandments. Sometimes I'll have another message covering it.
What's the other message?
Abortion. Shame. When we have an issue, I just go through the scriptures. What scriptures speak on that issue and state what God's word says on it.
So how many?
And abortion is murder. That's what I do more than anything else. Homosexuality is sin.
So do you have a sign for that too?
Yes, I do.
How many signs do you have?
I haven't counted them.
I had left Montgomery feeling like I'd been to a battleground. In Los Angeles, there was someone who had been to the front lines before. Larry Flynt, publisher of Hustler magazine, had been sued many times on the First Amendment, most famously by Jerry Falwell in a case that went to the Supreme Court, and Flynt had won. During an earlier case in 1978, he was shot outside a courthouse, an injury he survived but left him in a wheelchair.
If religion helps you get through the day, fine. I don't have a problem with it. But my personal opinion is I think that religion has caused more harm than any other idea since the beginning of time. I have been dragged through the courts, jailed, and even took a bullet for defending the First Amendment. I don't know anybody living today that's paid that price. The First Amendment is the cornerstone for our democracy. If it fell, all the rest of them would fall like dominoes. Janis Joplin once so eloquently sang the lyrics, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Well, I think that sentiment is more meaningful today than it was then. Because as a nation, we've already lost our innocence, and the only thing left to go is our freedoms.
A lot of people were fighting for the First Amendment and the Establishment Clause, but not everyone was winning in the courts. In San Francisco, Dave Kong had sued to have a large cross removed from public land and had lost. Can you tell me about Mount Davidson Park?
Yeah, Mount Davidson Park has been a public park since the beginning of the 1930s. Originally, there was a series of, when the land was private property, there were a series of wooden crosses that were constructed on the site. And all of them either fell down from disrepair, I think one of them might have burned down, and one or two of them might have been vandalized. And when the city got control of the land, it was given to them. They decided to erect the Mount Davidson Cross. They built this concrete cross 103 feet tall using public funds.
Is this it?
This is it. Just imagine that at night with a couple of light cannons on it and the fog rolling past the light. It's a very ominous sight.
Why is a cross on public property a big deal?
Well, I would say it's two things. First off, it's hard enough for atheists to get a fair shake in society without the government picking out and choosing sides and displaying a particular religious symbol. And also, I feel it helps perpetuate the false notion that's being bandied about lately that the United States was founded exclusively by Christians intended to be a Christian nation, and that's not at all the case. And this just perpetuates that myth. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said that you cannot have a permanent Latin cross, which is the preeminent symbol of Christianity, on public property. So at that point, they said you cannot have a cross on public property, so the question then became, how do you dispose of such an unconstitutional cross on public property? And they were bandying about several ideas, of course, possibly moving the cross, possibly selling the cross off, possibly selling the cross and the land that sat underneath it within the public park. To me, it's just outrageous that you've got a constitutional issue here and they're putting up for resolution to the highest bidder. You don't put constitutional issues up to sale for the highest bidder.
So you think they rigged the auction?
I think the auction was most definitely rigged, yes. They sold it to a group called the Council of Armenian American Organizations of Northern California. It was funny, during the auction, they were very careful not even to mention the word cross. They just said, we're selling off this piece of public property. Everybody at the auction knew exactly why they were there, and sure enough, as soon as the auction was over, everybody jumped up, the press jumped up and said, well, what are you going to do with the cross? You know, and immediately the Armenians said that they were going to maintain the cross and they were going to turn it into a memorial for all the Armenians who were killed by Turks during World War I. And that, unfortunately, has added an unfortunate ethnic aspect to this whole controversy. So anybody who is opposed to the sale of the Mount Davidson Cross is now being portrayed as an Armenian hater. We spent 3.5 days of depositions, John Messina and myself each, answering worthless questions such as, Mr. Kong, why don't you drive? Mr. Kong, are you gay? And my favorite, Mr. Kong, are you Jewish? I'm a Chinese, Indian atheist, and they're asking me if I'm Jewish. And I really wanted to tell them I am from the waist down, but my attorney had warned me about making any jokes. The outcome was disappointing. Am I sorry that I did it? No, I would still have done it. I mean, the city, in its arrogance, thought they could do whatever they could do, and no one would challenge them. I was the one person in San Francisco who had the power to challenge them, thanks to American Atheist, and I'm glad I did. I think we gave them a run for their money. I grew up in Iowa, which was enough to make an atheist out of anyone. And when I was about 16 or so, out of boredom in Iowa, I formed an atheist rock band called Sin. we had kind of a Roman stage set with these Romanized costumes, and we would hand out trinkets to the audience. We'd have these gold chalices filled with like the rubbers and the gold foil coins and the gold chocolate coins in the foil and things like that, and little Bibles, that they could, tear up. And we would toss these out to the audience, but before we toss them out, we'd say, "Is there a God?" And they would have to yell out, "No," before we would give them the trinkets. If they yelled out yes, they'd forget it, they wouldn't get anything. Yeah, oh, no, by the way, this was designed by George Kellum, who is quite a famous architect. And one of the things that kind of amused me when they were trying to decide how to dispose of the cross is everybody was praising the cross for its Art Deco style. And if you look at it, it's basically just two, as one cartoonist put it, two lines intersecting so as to form a cross-like structure. There's nothing really Art Deco about it.
So what were some ideas you could do with the cross?
Oh, well, one of our local members, who was an Alfred Hitchcock fan, had suggested turning it into a giant statue of Kim Novak. And of course, it being San Francisco, many people suggested turning it into a giant phallic symbol. A little San Francisco humor there for you. It's just not my year for litigation. I'm lucky I don't have a traffic ticket I'm challenging. I could end up in jail for 30 days.
In mid-October, the Supreme Court announced it would take the pledge case. It was scheduled for the following March.
Where are you from originally? Ethiopia. Oh. In Ethiopia, do they have a Pledge of Allegiance? Where the kids every day say that we pledge allegiance to the flag of the country of Ethiopia?
During the Emperor time.
With Haile Selassie? Did you like Haile? Who did you like better, Haile Selassie or Haile Mills?
Oh, no.
You wanted to take a walk to the Supreme Court?
I don't know, is it anywhere around here?
I don't know. Well, you said you knew where it was.
Oh, look at that. It's right there. What a shocker. Okay, you ready?
You been there before?
Yeah, actually, I did the tour. It's a cool building. It's beautiful. It's got marble, and it's got these carved banisters carved in the marble. Equal justice under law, except for people who don't believe in God. Okay. Let's go look on the door. Okay. You want to go in? I got the keys. No. Hello? Bill? Chief Justice Rehnquist, we're in close terms. Semper ubi sub ubi. I know Latin. That means always wear underwear. Oh, the Justinian Code. The Scholar Julian. I don't know, Praetor's Edict. We'll have to look that up. And the Shield of Achilles. Hey, there's nothing here. We don't even have the 10 Commandments. Nothing religious. Jeez.
You're going to argue this case yourself before the Supreme Court?
If they let me.
That's going to be very entertaining, I got to tell you. They're pretty. Are you prepared for this? You're going to have some.
Think so.
I'm sure you've heard Supreme Court arguments before. It's a tough group over there.
Yeah, not as tough as you.
So you ready to argue the case?
No.
How do you get ready?
Well, first you find out that you're going to have an opportunity to argue the case. So if I get that opportunity, then I'll have to start practicing. Look at this thing. Look, just shoot up there.
I thought you were a lawyer. You were a doctor, or what are you anyway?
I'm a patriot. That's what I put on all my applications now.
How do you want to be remembered?
Besides amazingly studly and a phenomenal singer, let's see, and warm and kind, compassionate, and just generally good. I don't know. As the person who changed the family law system so that we stopped harming perfectly fit parents.
And afterwards, you're going to keep on bringing suits?
If the government keeps intruding and violating people's rights, probably. It's cool. It's fun. It's interesting. The history is phenomenal.
Fun sounds kind of frivolous.
Why? Isn't life supposed to be fun? I stand for motherhood, America, and a hot lunch for orphans. Take off your hat, sir. Betsy Ross's flag is passing. Do you see him? I don't know the rest of the words.
In December, the Supreme Court gave permission for Mike to argue the case himself, which was very unusual. The date was set for March 24th. I arrived in Washington the night before. The Supreme Court press office had denied my request for credentials, saying an independent journalist wasn't bona fide news media, so I couldn't watch the arguments or be in the press areas.
Well, we were hoping to get some time.
When I called Mike Newdow to see when we could meet, he referred me to his media handler, who said his time was all booked.
In the afternoon?
I was starting to get the Pledge of Allegiance blues myself. At the Supreme Court that evening, there was a prayer vigil going on.
Antonin Scalia has stepped aside from this case. He has recused himself and will sit this case out. That makes it a 4-4 court. If it's a even split, it means the Pledge of Allegiance becomes supremely illegal in our society. So we're going to pray for the 8 justices and even the 9, because Justice Scalia's presence and influence will be known on this court, I guarantee you. But we're going to pray for more than the justices. We're also going to pray for the lawyers who will be arguing on both sides of the case tomorrow. Now, one of those lawyers is a newly qualified lawyer. His name is Michael Newdow. Michael Newdow is an ordained, if I might put this in quotes, an ordained atheist minister. He is also a physician, an MD, and he went to law school recently and qualified at the bar exam, and this court has waived all of its rules. Generally, you must, by their own rules, you must practice law for 3 years before you can argue a case before the court. You must be a member of the Supreme Court bar. Michael Newdow is neither. And yet they have bent over backwards, bent that rule all the way to the point of snapping to allow Michael Newdow the privilege of arguing his own case before the court. Now, we don't think that's sensible. We will shout to the north and the south.
Doing here?
Here for the hearings for the Newdow case, Pledge of Allegiance case.
What do you mean you're here for the hearings? It's not till tomorrow.
Well, they give out 50 tickets to the public only, and it's a first-come, first-served basis, so we're here in line waiting for the tickets when they're handed out in the morning.
How long are you going to wait here?
All night.
We've got a party going on.
The next day, the sidewalk in front of the court did look like a strange party, one that would be seen all over the world. The bona fide news media were easy to spot. They brought their own chairs. There were a lot of familiar faces. David Gordon, the school superintendent from Elk Grove.
Will the clergy,
the folks from the Christian Coalition that I'd met in Alabama.
On the platform here with me. Will the clergy who are present with us.
I'm also thinking about the fact
Sandy
that where
Rios,
we
the talk
stand
show
here,
host.
Thousands of our boys and girls are overseas, putting their lives at risk, and we're sending more and more over. Do we really want to send them into battle without the blessing of God Almighty?
Right.
What are you doing here?
And even John Baer, the pledge historian, was there.
The musical version of the Pledge of Allegiance.
How does that go? Can you sing it?
I pledge allegiance, pledge allegiance, pledge allegiance to the flag.
And our atheist friends, we love you so much. We know you hate God and don't believe God. It says, in God we trust on our money. We're going to take the money from you so you don't have to hold it anymore. We love you so much. We know
We know you won't say the pledge because it has God in it. We know you hate God, so we're passing a white bucket. Feel free to give us this hateful, ungodly, hate-filled money, okay?
This is not one nation under a God, because there is no God. In a little while, one man is going to be inside that building right there to convince the United States Supreme Court that we should be one nation, indivisible.
One nation under God. One more time. One nation under God.
Turning the country into a theocracy, and it's all against human rights. Anti-gay, anti-women, anti-reproductive rights, anti-abortion, anti-thinking.
You don't want to pledge?
I don't want to pledge
at all. Why is that?
We don't even have to have it. We don't need it.
By midday, the speeches were wearing thin. It was time for the principals in case 02-1624 to come out. First was Sandra Banning, the mother in the case, accompanied by her lawyer, Ken Starr.
We've never had any objection to our little girl reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
Finally, Mike Newdow appeared on the steps, walking out alone the way he had pursued the entire case.
Stop!
We tried to get his attention,
Michael!
but there were a few other people waiting for him.
This isn't atheism versus theism. This isn't God against no God. It's government getting involved in religion and government staying out of religion.
Take it to the sidewalk. Thank you.
I'll let you know in June. I think I did okay.
What was your reaction to the judge's congratulations while they were hearing your argument?
So what?
Did you feel like they were hearing your argument?
Yeah, you hope so.
Last question, let's go.
The press reports were glowing. The New York Times said Mike Newdow's appearance before the court was spellbinding. The guy who had once played the Music Man had given the performance of a lifetime. What do you think of Mike Newdow?
Well, I think Mike Newdow is a courageous man who is pushing the principle very, very hard of separation of church and state. I wouldn't hire him to be my lawyer. I think he's setting two examples. Anyone can bring a case and anyone can hurt civil liberties. And the difference between a good lawyer and a mediocre lawyer is a good lawyer thinks about the future and a good lawyer thinks about the impact of this case on precedent, and a mediocre lawyer just thinks about today and what a nice time he'll have arguing and how the press will ask him hard questions, nice questions after he's finished the argument. Any lawyer who has a pulse on the future of America would realize this is the wrong case to bring to the wrong court at the wrong time. He's a one-trick pony, and it's an important trick, but if he wanted to win this case on principle, he would have proceeded in a very different direction. He puts his own ego and his own principles before the effect that his case will have on separation of church and state. It will set back the cause of separation. It will lower the wall of separation ultimately.
How will it do that?
He'll lose. And when he loses, the Supreme Court will say it's okay to put God in the pledge. And when the Supreme Court says that, it's much worse than just having a pledge, which the Supreme Court has never passed on. I'm certain that he'll lose, because if he wins, he'll lose even worse. We'll have a constitutional amendment.
It may not have been the right time to change the law, but it was precisely the right time to spark a national debate about the place of religion and what it's doing in our government where it wasn't supposed to be. It had been a long road trip across America, and in the end, it was hard to know what it was all about. 2 words and a patriotic oath that most people couldn't remember anyway, and a constitutional issue tangled in a family feud. I think people wanted to cling to those 2 words, as if in a world drowning in change, it was the last lifeboat, and as it turned out, not even the Supreme Court wanted to rock that boat. I don't think I ever discovered truth, but I did learn a lot about American history, and as Mark Twain said, one thing about history, at least it rhymes.
One more time. Here we go. One more time. In your life, you'll hear some things others say are true. Senators and clergymen, and your teachers too. Listen well to what they say, but you need to know that just because they said it doesn't make it so. You'll hear so much, how can you know what's just not true, what just isn't so? People believe with such fervid zeal, question everything you're told to find out what's real. I will always be nearby, guide you in your years, love you through your laughter, hold you through your fears, try to give you answers when your questions flow. But just because I say it doesn't make it so.